Okay, welcome along to June's PeriClinic. We're going to be discussing HRT or not, which I think is quite a big question. But let's start with a quick round of intros. Katie.
Hi, I am Katie Redding. I am a certified midlife specialist and functional health practitioner. I work with women in peri to postmenopause. So basically anybody over 35-ish, 40. And my passion, my mission in life is to help empower women to be the boss of their health and their hormones. I just feel we feel so out of control in this season of life.
Mm.
I'm the type of person, I've always been in control of everything, my body, my mind, my business, all of it. And then, I hit 41 and it all went out the window. And so that's my mission, is to help women. And a large part of that is we talk about HRT and educating women, because we cannot just assume that our doctor knows what they're talking about. And even if they're a menopause specialist, I encourage every woman to be educated about their body, their hormones, and their treatment options so that they can advocate for their best health.
Love it.
Yeah.
Blair.
Hi, I'm Blair. I am an ADHD and perimenopause coach. I'm also a licensed therapist and a certified sex therapist. And I primarily work with same population. It just kind of grew into that, actually. And then through my own experience and sharing certain things with a lot of my clients, and in my therapy practice, I work with a lot of mood disorders. So in my coaching practice, it's kind of transitioned into that as well. And the combination of all of these things, of being in perimenopause, a lot of people being diagnosed with ADHD or figuring out there's some sort of neurodivergencies that have been going on that are flaring up because of the hormone decline. And then it's been a lot of educating people, and I've done my own deep dive and learning about myself and working with my medical professionals, and just sharing some of that knowledge and helping my clients also learn to advocate for themselves. And a lot of them, like myself, not knowing what the heck perimenopause was, or not knowing much information about it. So it's been a lot of educating about hormones as well.
Yeah. And Joe.
Hello. Hi, everyone. I'm Joe. One of the things I do is help Emily run the hub. The other thing I do is I'm a therapist. I'm a clinical hypnotherapist, psychotherapist, and mindfulness teacher. And so I tend to work with women through all different stages of peri, from really early to right the way through and into menopause and beyond. And I tend to help them. I think the thing that women come to me most for is help with anxiety and understanding anxiety, understanding the neuroscience behind it, brain fog, and vasomotor symptoms. So helping with hot flushes, cold shivers, tingling, the pins and needles that we get, that the more of the physiological stuff that we can actually heal and help through our application of certain techniques and tools and things, which is one thing that hypnotherapy is just brilliant for. Also insomnia and catastrophizing loops, overthinking, these tend to be the kind of the things that I work with. And yeah, I kind of slammed into perimenopause a bit like a speeding freight train, like most of us didn't really know what was happening, shamed myself massively for it because I was a therapist and I should have seen it coming and warded it off, or at least known what was happening. So that's been a bit of a journey, really, to kind of bring some acceptance and self-compassion into the fact that we don't know, actually. I'm a massive fan of choice. I'm a huge fan of advocating to give women the best information that we possibly can. I know that we talk a lot about HRT. I'm not a hormone specialist. I have had quite an extensive, should we call it baptism of fire, which then led into training around HRT. But I'm a massive fan of giving women the tools and the education so that they can decide for themselves, because it's a really personal journey, and I'm sure we'll get into that as this session goes on.
Absolutely. So let's just start at the very beginning. As they always say, it's a very good place to start. HRT, hormone replacement therapy. I think it's always worth saying that because I see it in the Facebook group quite often, people going, so what is this HRT that people are talking about? And I think those of us who work in this field, we're going, oh, it's just HRT, you know. And I think there's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of confusion as to what it is. So I'll just start with a quick basic overview and all chip in if I miss anything. But
Yeah,
HRT,
great.
hormone replacement therapy, also known as menopause hormone therapy, MHT, isn't it?
Yeah.
And there are various different ways that you can take it. So you can take it orally, like you would take the birth control pill. You can take it through patches, through gels, through sprays. In some areas, you can get it as pellets and as injections. We don't really have access to that in the UK, but it's, how do I, there's again, so there's sometimes a lack of understanding of what it is, but then there's also sometimes a lack of understanding as to the fact that it can be delivered in lots of different ways, and you might not get on very well with the first way you are prescribed, and that's okay. You know, just as there are lots and lots of different painkillers that help different people in different ways, there are lots of different ways that you can take HRT, different strengths, and so on and so forth. I won't go too deep into the individual hormones, but in very, very simplistic terms, and at this point I'm keeping it really simplistic. Estrogen is the primary one. Progesterone, very important, but to keep it really simple, because I don't want to overcomplicate anything at all, if you still have your uterus, so you haven't had a hysterectomy, you will need progesterone. If you no longer have a uterus, you may or may not get progesterone, but it's fine if you don't, if that makes sense. And then the third part into the thing is testosterone, which in the UK is nigh on impossible to get hold of. I think in the US you have a lot more chance. Katie, fill in any blanks that I've left there.
Yeah, I think that was a good overview. When we're talking about progesterone and do you need it or not, I mean, the big argument is, and a lot of doctors will say, if you don't have a uterus, it doesn't matter. But progesterone, we have progesterone receptors all over our body, right? So estrogen and progesterone, the two of them are responsible for over 4,000 chemical and biological processes that happen in the body. So every cell, tissue, organism, you know, everything. So technically, if you don't have a uterus, you don't need to have it to balance out the estrogen. And that all comes down to uterine lining protection. So, you know, prior to the last 10 or 15 years, we just thought we only need the progesterone if you have the uterus to prevent that lining from becoming too thick. And now we're realizing, no, your brain needs it, your bones need it, your mood, your sleep, everything else needs progesterone too. So, you know, that I think that would be the only thing to point out. You are absolutely correct. A lot of people will still say, if you don't have a uterus, don't worry about progesterone.
Absolutely. Yeah. And just as a quick aside, if anybody wants to know, if anybody wants to go down a bit of a rabbit hole learning more about progesterone, I would suggest looking up Lara Bryden. She's on Instagram and she's got some books and stuff, and she has done a lot of research into progesterone only HRT. And also, I'm just going to add, sorry, I'll stop talking. It's not about me, but anyway, there we are. A lot of people will have found that when they tried synthetic progestogens as birth control, that they didn't get on with it. You can get body identical progesterone as part of HRT, and it has way fewer side effects.
That's a really good point. Actually, we should maybe just touch.
That's what I was going to say. Maybe
go over to Katie and let maybe Katie tell us about the difference between synthetic and body identical would be really good right now, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely a huge point of confusion for people, because even doctors will refer to birth control as HRT, and it's really not. It is not. It is hormone therapy. It's not hormone replacement therapy.
No.
So they work completely differently. Synthetic forms of, you can get synthetic, which is completely chemically made, not natural for your body to respond to or utilize. And you can get that for estrogen or for progesterone in the synthetic form. as progesterone, it's called a progestin. So those are things like in IUDs, birth control, the implant in the arm, that would all fall under that synthetic category. And those are really designed for birth control. And the mechanism of action is to shut down the communication from the brain to the ovaries, so you don't get pregnant. Well, that means that your body is not getting what it needs in a natural way, in a natural cycle. So it doesn't respond in the same way as it does with bioidentical hormones. And bioidentical hormones are chemically, or molecularly, I should say, the same as what your body produces. So it's easy to recognize, doesn't cause disruption, and most people tolerate it much better. Now, there's a lot of nuances to that, and why, if you struggle with that, there are reasons why you might struggle with it. But the bioidentical form is usually way more utilized by the body, and has a ton of benefits to it. So sticking with bioidentical is going to be a better route, specifically for peri and postmenopausal women who are not necessarily concerned about birth control. If you need birth control for birth control, that's one thing. But a lot of women don't, and they're handed the birth control pill for perimenopausal symptoms. And all we do with that is shut down the body's communication. So we disconnect from our body, basically, and we don't protect the body in all the areas that we need to, the brain, heart, bones, all of that. We lose that protection because birth control is like, I don't know, depending on what you're on, 5 to 10 times the amount that HRT is. HRT is actually a much more natural choice. Sorry,
I'm just going
to.
No, not at all. But one other thing, I need to just do a translation thing, because what in the US is called bioidentical, in the UK is called body identical.
Okay.
And I know, honestly, and then in the UK there is an unregulated area called bioidentical, which is a totally other thing. But just to clear that up.
It's good to know, actually.
If anyone American is talking about bioidentical, they're talking about the same thing that a UK person is talking about when they say body identical.
Yeah. The terminology is so helpful, isn't it?
Yeah.
You'd think, couldn't we just have uniform terminology? That would be great, wouldn't it?
Yeah. But it's, exactly.
So that has given us a pretty good starting point for understanding HRT. Now, the purpose of this discussion was HRT or not. So I'm going to come to Blair and to Jo, because I know Katie is very much in the, I'm not going to say in the camp that everybody should have HRT, because I don't think anybody's in that camp. But Jo and Blair, you both work more in a sort of a more holistic and a non sort of prescription-y sort of area. So Blair, what's your professional and personal thoughts on HRT?
I'll start with personal, because it absolutely changed my life. For quite a few years, I was like, something's going on with me. But of course, I was that person where all my blood work came back normal. My doctors were like, well, that's wonderful. You were so healthy for your age. And I was like, that's awesome. Seriously. But like, this is weird. And, so I talked and I finally found a perimenopause specialist. And I didn't even know she was that at the time. I just was like, well, let's try this new doctor. I was looking for a new one. And it just so happened that the universe aligned, and that's what, and I was having more, and I think that's why, well, just naturally I'm a therapist, I focus a lot on the mood stuff, because that really was the first signs for me, was an increase in anxiety and panic and racing thoughts and insomnia and all of that stuff. And once I met my doctor, she was like, let's try hormones. Let's try some estrogen. I actually have a Mirena IUD. So I had that hormonal side, but just as Katie was explaining, like that really wasn't. So now I still have my IUD. I have a estrogen patch, and I also take progesterone at night to help me sleep. And let me tell you, when I, ADHD brain, forget to take my progesterone at night, I inevitably wake up at 3 a.m. and I'm like, damn it. Know exactly what's going on. I'm like, oh, I can't take it now, obviously, because it's going to throw my whole sleep cycle off. So I just have to like figure out my ways to get back to it. But as far as professional, I think I am a big advocate of really finding what works for you. In fact, I just talked about the same exact topic last week in my group on my live because I have a friend in my group who was asking about navigating perimenopause without HRT because she can't take it because she has migraines. Now, I can't speak to her stuff specifically, and I didn't try to, but I was talking about how the skills that I teach are dialectical behavior therapy, or DBT, essentially. And you can use those regardless, whether you take HRT or not, or whether you're able to or not, or whatever that personal choice is for you and your body. In DBT, there's a whole skill set on interpersonal effectiveness, and that's all about setting boundaries and learning to say no. I use that as a big tool to help people figure out how to have conversations with their doctors or to look for a second opinion if they have that available to them and really explore what they feel most comfortable with. So I am a huge advocate, no matter what people's choices are, helping them to figure out what feels healthiest for their comfort level and their emotional well-being, as well as anything that might be going on with their body. Because HRT, I mean, as much as it's advocated for, it might not be right for everybody. So you really have to figure out what is best for you.
Definitely.
Absolutely. I'm just going to quickly jump in. Sorry, I keep jumping in. I don't normally do this, but anyway, there, and I'm not going to go in depth into this, but it's something to encourage people to go down the rabbit hole of, should they be interested. There are kind of old guidelines that suggest that certain people are contraindicated for HRT, and the newer forms of HRT actually don't exclude those people. So I often hear of people saying, I've got a history of blood clots, so I can't take it. Well, actually, a transdermal one can be okay. I've got a history of migraine, I've got a history of whatever. There's quite a lot of different things that on the old evidence would have precluded those people from using HRT, but actually under the new forms of HRT and the more up-to-date research, a lot of people are not precluded any longer. And I think that's just worth quickly adding in.
Yeah.
Jo, your
Yeah.
personal and professional opinion, please.
Wow, where do I start with this one? Okay.
Well,
it's a bit of a scary road, isn't it? And I think the thing that personally for me, I had to do a lot of my own research to begin with, because there was nobody, this is pre me knowing you and the hub and everything, nobody giving me good enough information on this. And that's something that is changing, I'm happy to say, but not quickly enough. My personal view is that it made a massive difference to me to start HRT. It took a bit of a fight to get it, and it took me marching into my doctor with a copy of the NICE guidelines printed off and popping it on her desk and saying, right, you've dismissed me twice as being fat and anxious. Now we're going to have a different conversation today, which will result either in you giving me a differential diagnosis and referring me to some specialists, or I'm going to walk out of here with a prescription for some HRT that I'd like to try, please. Thank you very much. So that was that appointment. And on a physiological level, it helped massively, interestingly, with my migraines, and I was having about 20 hot flushes a day, which were not fun. And within probably 6 weeks, my migraines had disappeared, and it allowed me to start living my life again. I was getting to a point where I was having 2 hideous migraines a week, and that's not sustainable. So it was pretty miserable. And so within 6 weeks, I was kind of feeling much more like my old self physiologically. It was great. And I was thinking, yes, this is good. This is good. And it's always stayed good. And at the same time, I started to realize that it's not a magic bullet. HRT is amazing, but it's not a magic bullet to fix your life if there are other things that need to be addressed. you know, and we'll get into those, I'm sure, but, you know, if it's nutrition, if it's movement, if it's work-life balance, if it's stress, whatever it is, HRT is fabulous, and it's not the be-all and end-all either. And I see so many women in the group saying, it's not fixed my anxiety, it's not sorted this out, it's not, I still can't sleep, and so many other things that they were expecting it to be a panacea for, and it isn't.
Yeah.
I think that's the other thing that we need to kind of just really gently educate women to say, this is about a life audit and a bit of an overhaul. It's a multifaceted puzzle that we need to actually design our own pieces for as we move forward. So my professional opinion is that I think HRT is absolutely amazing. I think if it works for you, it's fabulous. Absolutely go for it. And if it doesn't work for you, that's fabulous too. So I think, yeah, I think I'm more about life overhaul, life audit at this point, to start to address everything in your life calmly with massive dollop of self-compassion. I created a little system called Hypno HRT, which I do on a one-to-one basis. It doesn't stand for hormone replacement therapy. It stands for, well, there's two things. It stands for hopeful resilience training, and also hormone reset therapy. So it's a kind of a double-banded thing. And what it actually does is, on a one-to-one level, I've been using it, it actually helps your HRT to work better. And it also helps your brain to help regulate your cortisol and serotonin levels naturally, so that, you know, a lot of women can't take HRT or don't want to, and that's great. So this is kind of the angle I'm coming at it from, personally and professionally.
Absolutely. And I think, Jo, you've touched on something really important there, that a lot of people, I need to backtrack to make this make sense.
Yeah.
So I think there's still this perception that perimenopause and menopause is a diagnosis, which it isn't. It's a life stage, and that therefore it needs to be medicated. It doesn't. It's a life stage, not a diagnosis.
Yeah.
And I think it's very important to have that clear in your mind, that, you know, in puberty, your hormones were doing all sorts of crazy stuff. And yeah, you might have needed some things to help you through. And the same happens now. The difference between puberty and perimenopause, I mean, one of many differences, is that now we're grown-ups, which is a bit rubbish. And, you know, so we've got a lot more responsibilities than we had when we were like 15 or 16, and a lot more stress and a lot more that needs resolving. And I think, exactly as you said, Jo, HRT can be a really useful part of that jigsaw.
Yeah.
Especially if everything is too much and you need something to sort of take the edge off, so that you can start to address the rest of it.
Yeah.
So that you can start to eat slightly more kindly to yourself, so that you can start to move a bit more kindly to yourself. Because if everything is huge, you can't do anything, can you? You just become completely overwhelmed and completely stuck.
Yeah.
And I think we should all have a kind of a healthy respect for the fact that HRT is incredibly helpful, and used in the right way can massively help, but understand that it's not a silver bullet. It's not going to replace sorting out those boundaries and reducing stress, or finding ways to manage stress, and so on and so forth.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Katie,
I see it.
Oh, sorry, Blair, carry on.
Oh no, sorry. I was gonna say I kind of talk about it like any other medication that I talk about with my clients. And I'm a huge advocate of medication. I have some clients that are on it and some clients that aren't taking any various form of psychiatric medication. And I just tell them that these are tools in our toolbox that turn the volume down on stuff. We don't want to turn it all the way off. We don't want to turn our emotions all the way off. They give us information, they tell us things.
Right.
But they turn that intensity of volume down, so that then we can implement those skills that you know logically that you can use. Your emotions are just driving the bus and trying to drive you in all kinds of crazy directions.
Yeah. That's a really good point. I love that. The metaphor of them they are messengers, aren't they? It's, what are they trying to tell us? What are they showing us? What do we need to respond to in all kinds of different ways?
And I think it's fair to say that all of us that plummeted headfirst into perimenopause without having a clue what had hit us around the head probably did need a bit of a life audit.
Yeah, I know I did.
I know I did.
Yeah, I don't know any woman that doesn't. I think we resist it as well because at the point where we come into perimenopause, when we start experiencing severe symptoms, we're just derailed. We're overwhelmed, and it's just like, what? And I've got to do a life audit on top of that. Big change feels scary anyway, whether it's change that's happening to you or change that you're choosing. We're designed to view all of that as threat. So, you know, where do you start, really?
Right.
Yeah.
And mine hit right around the time of the pandemic.
Me too.
Yay!
Me too.
I was like, oh, what is this? Is it pandemic stress? Is it hormones? Is
Right.
it
I was the same. Same.
Yeah.
Didn't know what the hell was happening. I thought, you know, I blamed it on lockdown for a while. We were also in the process. I was in the process that year running up to lockdown of selling a big business as well. And I thought I was having a heart attack at several times throughout that year because it was just completely overwhelming. Hence you're a bit anxious and fat diagnosis by my doctor. I pointed out to her at that point that I was actually a therapist. And I was quite good at managing my own stress also, I thought. But yeah, we don't know. And one of the things that I was going to raise today is, and I'm sure we'll get into this in the process of conversation anyway, was about what precludes women from thinking that HRT is a good option to explore. You know, what barriers are we still experiencing? And I know a big one that still looms large, but we see so much debate in the group, in the big hub, about yes or no. You know, I won't touch it. I'm not doing it. Or I'm not going to resort to that. It's like it's a last resort.
Yeah.
There's so much to unpick around that.
I know,
Ooh,
right?
big topic.
Sorry for like throwing that kind of grenade in there. It might be a bit much, but
Okay, Katie, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, I think the obvious, right? The WHI study that, you know, I was a nurse before going into more natural holistic healthcare. And I remember giving little red pills to all the old ladies, little Premarin pills. And then suddenly in 2002, we stopped giving them. And we were terrified, literally terrified of hormones for 2 decades. Two entire decades because of that study. You guys know this, but I think that's a big barrier still because the educational system, at least in the US, was still teaching off of that old code, right? So that's a huge problem. And if we have been programmed, I know in the US, we are programmed, if we have a problem, we go to the doctor. We call the doctor, the doctor knows best, and we do what they tell us to do. So that's a huge issue. But the other issue that I see a lot, and I see it a lot in the group, is I want to do things the natural way.
Right.
And I think that also just comes down to education because synthetic hormones are not natural, right? Progestins, and there is a use for them. So I'm not necessarily saying we should never use them, but to understand the differences, synthetic hormones are not natural, but bioidentical or body identical, they are natural, right? They are literally the chemical structure. We can look at 17 beta estradiol, which is in the body identical or bioidentical, versus the synthetic form, different chemical structure. So it is natural to have the right type of hormones for your body.
Yeah.
And we don't have to like grin and bear it anymore. We don't have to suffer through. You know, I remember doing my OBGYN rotation in nursing school, and they talked about hysteria. Do you know what hysteria is?
Absolutely, we do.
In the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, women were labeled as, oh, she has hysteria. She has to go to the insane asylum.
Yeah.
Well, it was perimenopause.
Right.
You know, so we've been experiencing it for a while, but you know, we have different tools. We have better tools. You know, with the Premarin that we had that came out in, I believe, the 70s.
Yeah.
That actually, and it wasn't the best, right? It's an estrogen made from horse urine and 50 other chemical compounds. So it is not natural, but even that was still protective, and it saved so many women's sanity and relationships and lives. And so, you know, if it comes down to my choice, I'm not going to choose to have Premarin because now I have 17 beta estradiol that I can take. But it is natural. And I think that's a huge thing that is still a misconception. And some women are like, I can just do this naturally on my own. And we don't have to.
No.
If you choose to go that route, that's fine. But I think a lot of people choose that because they don't have education about safety, efficacy, and what it does for our bodies, because it protects our bones, our heart, our brain, our vagina. It does all of those things. So we're going to see a decline if we are low in hormones.
Of course. And this is the thing. This is the thing that we kind of struggle to get across in the group. Everyone said, I've got this symptom, I've got that symptom. Well, of course you have, because every single cell in your body has an estrogen and progesterone receptor. And so we're kind of like, people are genuinely still surprised that they're experiencing these symptoms. And I'm not saying that every single woman has to go on HRT, but the education has got to be better, I think.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, that's a big thing I'm an advocate for, whether you choose to or not. In fact, I had a client last week who was saying that she thought all of this, meaning I started talking about hormones and perimenopause. She was naming all of this stuff. And of course, a lot of it was trauma related. And then she was like, but I don't know why it's all of a sudden happening. And I was like, I do.
Yes.
And I was like, it's your hormones as well. And she was like, that's just, big pharma. And I was like, I was like, I'm gonna stop you right there. It is a natural thing that happens to all of us. I said, you make choices that are best for you. I said, but please do a little. I was like, here's some information. And I just sent her some things that I had on hand. And I said, I'm not trying to tell you you have to go in a certain direction. You make choices that are best for you. I said, but please, like, educate yourself and find some research. And I gave her some education on it. And I don't think, I mean, I'm not obviously meant to change her mind, but I just wanted to inform her and say, no, that is not the case. And I just want you to be informed, because you may decide to take this and you may decide to go this route, and there's no shame in it. But I just want you to be informed and to know what's going on before you jump to conclusions and start saying things.
Yeah.
Emily,
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. I think
do we
another
want to talk about, like, if you don't choose estrogen? Want to talk about that, like, because I know we're kind of it probably seems like we're all pro hormone therapy, but I think educating women on what happens if you don't choose it.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
You want me to go?
Yeah.
Please do.
You have to turn me off if you want to turn it off. Because I think this is helpful to understand, like, the bigger picture when you're looking at risk versus benefit or pro versus con. Having that information of, if you don't choose hormone replacement therapy, which is a valid choice for some people, and I support it as long as it's not based on fear and on education.
misinformation. Yeah.
Yes.
But when the process of perimenopause is, as we lose our egg supply, our ovarian reserve, and that's dwindling down, that's where hormones are declining. And then when we no longer have our period, those eggs are gone. We are not producing hormones. Okay, so let me give you an example. When you are a cycling woman, your estrogen could be 200, 300, 400, 700. When we're pregnant, it can be even sky high. When our body takes over, our adrenal glands take over in postmenopause to make any hormones necessary. And if we're lucky, we're making 15. Okay.
Wow.
So we went from 2, 3, 4, 500 to 5 to 15. Does that?
Wow.
Now we know why we go crazy. That's just estrogen. We go from, a progesterone level of 30 to 0.5 in postmenopause.
Yeah.
That's significantly different. So our adrenal glands are what has to produce for us if we want to do this naturally.
Yeah.
And two things happen. One, if you go into perimenopause or postmenopause super stressed and your adrenal glands are shot, they're not going to do a good job.
They can't.
So your testosterone is not going to be good, and neither are your other hormones. The second thing to consider is that the type of estrogen that your body makes post-menopause comes from a conversion in the adrenal glands, and it converts to estrone.
Yeah.
Estrone is E1, because you have three. We don't have one kind of estrogen. We have three kinds of estrogen.
Yeah.
And E1 is an inflammatory type of estrogen. Okay, it's made from our fat cells. It's made from our adrenal glands, and from it's called aromatase, where it converts. And that is an inflammatory estrogen. It doesn't have the same kind of benefits that E2 and E3 have, right? E2 is estradiol and E3 is estriol. So it doesn't have the same benefits. Now, it can convert to E2, but we don't know if you're a good converter, I'm a good converter or not. And chances are, because it's an inflammatory estrogen and we have inflammation in our body naturally, that is the type that can eventually lead to disease down the road. And it doesn't provide for us the same benefits like bone, brain, and heart protection that E2 does. So yes, your body can make estrogen after menopause, but it's a different kind and has less benefits.
And I think that's really key here, isn't it? I think there's a real fixation on HRT as symptom management, when actually the bigger picture is that it's longevity, it's bone health, it's heart health, it's, you know, all the work that Dr. Lisa Mosconi's doing into the dementia effect and things like that. You know, it's a so much bigger picture. And absolutely. One thing I just wrote down in relation to Joe's question about people's hesitancy and arguments against HRT and stuff was, I see this argument quite often about longevity, that, oh, well, in previous generations, everybody died at 50. No, they didn't. No. Average life expectancy has got longer, but a lot of that is because people aren't dying in childbirth and in childhood. The people who've lived a long time have always lived a long time. Like my great-grandmother was 96 or something when she died, and, you know, she insulted Hitler many years ago. But anyway, that's another whole story. But yeah, I know. But this notion that our grandmothers, great-grandmothers, whatever, didn't struggle because they didn't live long enough is simply because that whole data set includes childhood mortality and death in childbirth. And therefore, of course, that affects the overarching life expectancy. But the people who lived through all of that were still living to a good old age. And I think that's worth bearing in mind, because I've heard far too many people go, oh, well, you know, previous generations, everyone died by 55. And it's like, no, they didn't.
No, they didn't.
No, they didn't. Maybe on average, but that's because lots of people had died in childbirth. But, you know, once people have got through menopause, there's every chance that they'll live another 30, 40 years. And that hasn't vastly changed in the people who were going to have the really long life anyway.
No, that's true, because it's about all factors of your life, isn't it? How your
exactly.
Life
and so I think this suggestion that comes up quite often, I see in the Facebook group, this suggestion that, oh, well, in previous generations, everyone just dropped off a cliff. It's like, they didn't.
No, I think in previous generations,
they didn't have. Previous generations didn't have the level. Women were not expected to be breadwinners, mothers,
Absolutely
CEOs.
not.
There
you go.
We have the invention of light. You know, we're up at any hour of the day working. We don't ever turn our phone off.
Constantly connected.
I know, it's crazy.
In addition to the environmental effects of all the chemicals, like all of that is very new for us as a human race. And I think that impacts our ovaries, and it impacts our adrenal glands, and it impacts our entire body. So I do think we struggle more with it today, but a lot of it is environmental. It is not because God made us differently today than he did before. No. We as humans are still the same. Our environment is very significantly changed. And that's why going back to your previous point, Joe, I think you said, you know, HRT is not the magic pill.
No.
It's an amazing tool, and I'm a huge proponent of it. But if you still are slathering on the chemicals and you're eating crappy food and you're running yourself ragged, you're not going to
Can't.
notice
It can't keep up with all of
This is
that, can it?
And we're back to the life audit thing. You know, this is the thing that has to underpin it, I think, in perimenopause, is an essential life audit point to create who you want to be next.
Absolutely.
And you know, going back to what Katie was just saying about how post-menopause, it's your adrenal glands that are creating what little bit of estrogen your body is creating. Well, where does the adrenaline and the cortisol come? Oh, hold on a second. What is it that leaps in when we're stressed? Oh, look, suddenly it all makes sense that stress is a massive disruptor of hormones.
It is.
Mhm.
If getting HRT can help you to get on top of the stress so that you can start doing the life audit,
Great.
I just, you know, yes, there are potentially side effects. Yes, if you read the leaflet that comes with it.
Oh, don't even get us started on the leaflets.
If you read the leaflet with any medication, you would just never take any medication. But I think because of the WHO study back in 2002, because of that, I think people have become overly attuned to wanting to read the leaflet when it comes to hormones.
I know.
Did any of us worry about reading the leaflet on the pill though?
No.
Have you read the leaflet on Tylenol?
Well, I was just about to say to you,
Tylenol is way worse.
is
Advil
Tylenol the
way
same
worse.
as paracetamol?
Yes, it's
Because I was
yeah.
just about to say to you, one of the most dangerous medications on the
Right.
market is Tylenol, paracetamol, because it will absolutely knacker your liver. But we don't read that leaflet, and we all pop Tylenol or paracetamol or Advil or ibuprofen. They're not quite as bad, but you know, we pop these things all the time when we've got a headache or whatever, and we don't know what's in them.
Well, and I think it's interesting that they put these black box warnings on all the hormones, right? Because especially bioidentical ones that are chemically the same as what God made for our body. But when we think about the difference between pharmaceuticals and bioidentical hormones, there isn't an antidepressant deficiency.
No.
We don't, there isn't a pain medication deficiency. Like when we look at pharmaceuticals, our body, human body, doesn't have a deficiency in those tools. And they're all tools because they can be used as tools. But when we look at hormones, we actually have a deficiency in those.
Yeah.
So understanding they're all tools and working with somebody who understands that bigger picture, so they know which tool to use at what time and for how long, and also work on the rest of the stuff, the environment, the lifestyle.
There you go. I was just talking to my brother-in-law, is an English guy, but he works in the US, and he was very high up in Bayer pharmaceutical company. He's worked around all different ones. He works for GlaxoSmithKline and loads of others. And he's just recently retired from Bayer. And I think he's probably got a little bit more to say about things now that he's retired. But he said to me, dear God, never read the leaflets that accompany medications. He said, because we have to do them as a massive litigation arse covering exercise. He said, none of the things that are in those leaflets are ever going to happen to anybody, but we've got to put them in there as a possibility so we don't get sued. And that blew my mind.
This is the thing, and I do find it I do find it really interesting that there is this barrier for a lot of women to you know, they might potentially get the prescription, they get the meds home, they get the patches or whatever home, and then they go, oh, I can't possibly put it on because I've read the leaflet. And it's like, yes, but any antibiotic you get prescribed,
but yet they're on 5 pharmaceutical medicines, right? I'm terrified of hormones, but I'll take 5 pharmaceuticals.
Yeah, and SSRIs and SNRIs.
But it's just an interesting sort of mental hurdle.
We've been programmed.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
The number of women we see in the group, though, that say, I've got my patches and my pills in front of me, I am terrified to start taking them. And that comes up daily in the group.
I know.
Do that too.
I know. Yeah. And as you said, Katie, this does feel like we're all very, very pro. And I don't think we are, actually. I think we're just saying that
Education,
absolutely.
In the context of there being such a lot of negativity about it, I think we need to still be a voice for the fact that there are positives, you know, a lot of positives.
Yeah.
And it isn't for everyone. Like
No.
nothing is for everyone, you know.
Oh,
And
point out something else that I think is important, because some women try therapy, hormone therapy, and when it doesn't work in the first 2 weeks,
they give up.
they give up, or they go back to their doctor and the doctor doesn't know how to troubleshoot things that come up.
Yeah.
There's intermittent bleeding, or I'm not sleeping, or whatever. Really important to understand is that this is such a nuanced thing,
Yeah.
right? Like, this is why it is super important that we have to start at the top, where we are getting providers that write prescriptions, them educated, because it's going to take more than 2 weeks to find your dose, and you might need a different route, you might need a different dose. It's all dependent on your history. If you were on birth control for a long period of time, your receptors don't know what's going on. It's going to take a while. If you are postmenopausal, it's going to take longer for your body to adjust to it than if you start it when you're 40.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of that where people, I think that also adds to this kind of fear of like, well, see, it didn't work. Like I tried it and it didn't work. And it can take 12 to 18 months.
Of course.
And
if
for some
perimenopause,
people,
it's always like this. So
but for some people, HRT is literally night and day, isn't it?
Yeah,
For
it
some
is.
people, it genuinely saves people's lives. You know, I've heard people speaking, and I've seen stuff on, you know, from some of the quite big names in the menopause world in the UK, of people who were literally at the point of thinking that they shouldn't be alive any longer.
Yes.
And they've started HRT, and it has made them feel human again really quickly. And I think it's worth considering. Just like, let's say, if you're anemic, you know, taking iron takes effect really quickly when you're anemic. But if you're kind of okay, taking iron doesn't show as quickly, does it? And I think we have to think about it in a sort of similar way to that. To any kind of deficiency of stuff, that it depends how deficient you are as to whether it is going to kick in really quickly. But yeah, as you say,
how well your receptors are,
right,
How well you receive it. Yeah, absolutely.
and how many endocrine disruptors are sitting on top of your receptors.
Right.
That goes back to the chemicals in the environment. Like so many things impact it. So it's not as straightforward as, oh, I went to my doctor and he gave me a patch and I'm going to be fine. And I that's also part of what I educate. So that's why women need to know more about their bodies. This is different than anything else in the medical world, right? Like if we break our arm, I don't need to do my own research before I go to the doctor.
Right.
I'm going to go there and he's going to say, we're going to reset your arm. We're going to put it in a cast. You'll be fine in 6 weeks.
Yeah.
This is different. We as women need to get educated so we are more powerful when we walk into that office and we can have a really good discussion. That's how we know if the provider even knows what they're talking about.
Right.
Yeah. I find women are like, well, I want to find a good provider. Okay. What questions are you going to ask that provider to make sure that they actually know? Because just them saying they're a menopause specialist, that's not good enough.
Doesn't mean anything, does it? Do you know, I think we need to provide a list of questions to ask and how to help women advocate for a really good GP appointment or menopause provider appointment. That would be really useful.
I think also, I'm going to quickly steer us onto one of my most favourite topics: tracking. You know, if you've been tracking your symptoms and tracking what's going on, and you've got to know your own body, it's a lot easier to advocate for yourself because you know what's right and what's wrong for you, and you start to notice when things are improving because you've got used to checking in with yourself. I will absolutely hold my hands up and say, when I first started experiencing peri symptoms, I did not track anything. I thought that I had a period once a month and then whatever, and I just never even thought about it. And then I started tracking it and started seeing that everything was so interlinked and so obvious, but I couldn't see it until I had the data in front of me. And the number of people to whom I've suggested that they track for a couple of months and then they've come back saying, oh my God, I don't feel awful every day. It's like, no, you probably don't, but we focus on the days when we're
designed to. Our safety brain will happily tell us that everything is permanently dreadfully awful every single day. And so tracking does give us a little bit of objectivity over what's going on, which is
also it gives us some information to give to the doctor. It gives us a starting point for that conversation, because, you know, as you say, if you don't know what questions to ask to the doctor can't answer them. And, you know, certainly over here with the NHS, the doctors have got maximum 10 minutes with us. And 10 minutes is not long enough to go in with like a list of things that are going on, but without anything joining the dots, because a lot of the symptoms that show up during perimenopause and menopause can show up under any number of other circumstances as well, if you haven't made the link with it being cyclical.
Yeah.
Once you've got that link, then you're helping your doctor to meet you halfway. You're going, right, all these things are happening, but what I've seen is that it's all really bad just before my period, or it's all really bad at this point. Then, you know, you've immediately met your doctor halfway. And so your doctor's like, okay, cool, we can rule out a lot of the things that it could have been that show up as that, because we already know that it's going with your cycle.
Right. And the different types of hormone therapy are targeted towards different sometimes. So if you're struggling with certain symptoms, they may be able to work with you and determine, okay, this type might be where we want to start to target some of these things.
Right.
So really, that was the number one thing I talked about. The first thing I talked about in my live training in my group last week was track. Whether you track it on paper, track it in an app, however you're most comfortable, on a calendar, whatever you do, finding a system where you're starting to not just notice where you are in your cycle, but any symptoms that are coming up, any symptoms that are changing, just really getting in tune with what's happening with your body. And also, I'm always going to throw in there emotionally, because people just they disregard that. They only think about the physical symptoms, that they're not their thoughts and the emotions that are coming along.
I think it's only when the emotions start getting really severe that they start to join the dots and attribute it to perimenopause.
Or something.
And I think that's something that's worth mentioning about tracking as well, because I've had people sort of say to me, oh, I'm on such and such a birth control, so I can't track because I don't have a period. It's like, I'm not asking you to, I don't actually particularly care when your period is. That's actually fairly irrelevant. I want you to track everything else. I want you to track the things that are getting in the way of your life.
Yeah.
Whether that's anxiety, insomnia, whatever, hot flushes, doesn't matter.
Yeah, anything. Yeah,
track
I don't have
those things.
Yeah, I don't have a period because I'm on an IUD.
Right.
So, like that is
it's still going to show, if it's cyclical, if it's hormonal, it's still going to show up that there's going to be a really nice clear pattern once you've been tracking for a little while.
Right.
And you know, it's another thing where we've kind of been disconnected from our bodies for years, you know, societally, that you know, women show up the same every day, and then suddenly this blood thing happens. Oh no. And it's like, well, no, that's not actually what's happening. You know, we're quite complex with our hormones, and we're actually showing up slightly differently every day, and there is a bleed as part of that, you know, but it's not it's leaning into that and really getting to understand what your body is telling you at different times in your cycle, I think is just a really empowering thing.
Yeah.
That coupled with then educating yourself around HRT and around menopause and around all these things, I just think puts everybody on a much, much stronger footing.
Yeah, I think so. I think we should hopefully be in a place soon where we're advocating for women to start tracking everything in their 30s, really. Mid-30s onwards, the cognitive changes start to happen, not cognitive, neurological changes start to happen. And so that, plus getting better information about options as we move forward, I think that's got to be a massive help to women from sort of 35 plus.
I agree.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't know if it's helpful, but I do have an advocacy guide. It's just a super short, like 6 steps and it includes a tracker, because
lovely.
All of my freebies have trackers because it's so important.
Lovely.
It is
so important. Definitely. Very useful.
Very. So I'm just looking at the time. I think we are going to have to round up. So Blair, what would be your closing thoughts on HRT or not?
Again, I think we've all agreed on this. Educating, whether you choose to feel like it's best for you, it's really educating yourself on yourself, and educating yourself on the different types. And like Katie beautifully explained, like what all the different, like just our natural estrogen is doing inside of our body. And just really understand, I am a big advocate of the science behind things and really connecting that to people. And I mean, I did a whole thing on like the science of breathing and what it actually is doing in your body. And a lot of my clients would roll their eyes when I would say, take a deep breath. And now they're like, that's really actually refreshing to know how it's helping me physically and the oxygen and where it's going in my brain and what it's slowing down. And so on this side of things, I'm a big advocate of also educating and understanding this, just the science, just the biology behind it.
Joe, what's your closing thoughts?
My closing thought, it's a really good question, is maybe slightly cryptic. It can change your life, but it's not going to fix your wider life. That's my closing thought.
That's a good one.
And Katie, I'm going to come to you last because I think you've got the biggest opinion.
I think the message I want everybody to know is education. You have to be the CEO of your hormone health. And we have to be careful where we get information, because right now we are in an information age where it's everywhere. So you might listen to something and then be like, I go this way. And then you listen to something else and I go this way. Or we listen to our girlfriends.
Yeah.
And then it's a game of telephone, right? And at the end of the day, does the message that started out actually get to you, or is it watered down and there's a lie here and a myth there? And we have to really protect where we're getting the information. So I always encourage women to work with somebody who's very trained, very specialized. Like I offer health coaching in addition to testing and other things, but and I'm not saying it has to be me. Find somebody that you can work with just educationally, to a safe space for education, because that is really key to being able to make a good decision for yourself. So it's not based on fear, it's based on fact.
Yeah. Awesome. And I think just to add to that, I think you're absolutely right on the trusted sources. We are in a bit of a trust recession at the moment. And I think it's just important to reframe the fact that every single expert in PeriHub is qualified and insured in their own field. So Emily and I vet everybody that comes into the hub as an expert, so we can trust the people in the hub to give us decent information.
Yeah, and you know, the experts cover a very wide range of different things, and we'll have some differing opinions, and that's fine, but they will all be able to point you to the science, and that's really important.
It is.
And as I mentioned earlier, if anybody wants a sort of impartial from the hub and so on and so forth thing, then I would honestly look up Lara Bryden. She's my number one suggestion, specifically for perimenopause. And what have you said? Jahira has just said, thank you for putting this Zoom together. It's been really informative. Seriously considering HRT. I'm just hoping to become more comfortable with the idea of being on HRT essentially for the rest of my life.
That's a really good point. Let's talk about
that is something we
just
haven't
for a
covered
second.
off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is the thing that blew my mind, was lowering of all cause mortality with HRT. 30%. So Katie, can you give us those stats? Because that's mind-blowing.
Between 30 and 40%, it reduces your all-cause mortality. Now, we're all going to die.
That's crazy.
Right?
Yeah.
We're all going to die. But like, this is beyond, you know, do you want to die having lived a nice full life where you were active till the day you die? Because that's what men do, right? Yeah. They live until the day they die, and then they fall over dead, usually. Women, post-menopause, we have this season, post-menopause to the day we die. We might live longer, but we're in nursing homes, in wheelchairs, we have broken hips, we die of urosepsis. Yeah. So it's about living longer and better. And so it does reduce your all-cause mortality, meaning your risk of all of those things goes down by 30% if you're on it. Yeah. And women are always like, well, how long do I have to stay on it? It used to be give the smallest dose for the shortest amount of time. But if you think about it, because we're replacing something that's natural, that our body originally created and no longer makes, it's really, we're biohacking, right? It's longevity. So if you want to feel good forever, then you would stay on them as long as you want those positive effects of brain, heart, and bone protection. You'll want to stay on them. These are not pharmaceuticals, where we do use the philosophy of smallest dose, shortest time. Yeah. We're different playing fields.
I think you're right. There's a very different mindset, isn't there, around how we address longevity of synthetics versus bio/body identical HRT. Definitely. Good point.
And I'll be
And rumor has it that Queen Elizabeth was on HRT until she died, and she was what, 94 or something when she
Yeah.
died. So,
go.
and she
Speak
still
up for
had
her.
all her faculties. I mean, she was an amazing woman, frankly,
Yeah, she was.
keeping the royals out of
Yeah.
it. But you know, she was an inspirational woman. So
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the science is changing in that direction as well. So I think as more and more evidence comes out about how women are enjoying longer, fuller lives, I think it's going to become a bit of a no-brainer that staying on it, and again, reframing the mindset around staying on it. It's like we're on some punishment regime that we've got to stay on for the rest of our life. Actually, the reverse is true. We're replenishing our diminished resource of something until the day we die. So
awesome. Thank you so much, ladies. That's been another amazing chat. Let me stop the recording. If I can find where I do that. There we are. It's right in front of me.